Thanks. Really amazing symposium so far. So in Japan, teens are sending each other blank text messages. And this is a phenomenon I heard about a few years ago where essentially teens, especially in romantic relationships, will send each other a blank text message. Essentially, it's just a blank bubble that pops up on your phone. And the idea is that you are supposed to then respond to that blank text with another blank text as quickly as possible. You should allow as little time elapsed as possible so your romantic partner, your boyfriend or girlfriend, is not waiting for a response. So the idea is throughout the day you could just nudge each other with these blank text messages. And this is sort of fitting within the message of our contemporary moment, which is we live in an instantaneous culture. We have Twitter feeds about news that's happening right at this moment. I don't even look at the news anymore. I just go to Twitter and find out what's happening. We have live video streams of protests. Black Lives Matter protests are happening right now on your phone. But beyond the idea of this instantaneous culture, I look at waiting. I'm really interested in the ways that waiting is a fundamental part of what we do. And as I look at waiting throughout history, I think about our own moment in this instantaneous culture, and I'm beginning to realize that it's a false mythology. Since 2009, there are about 7 billion mobile phone subscriptions around the world, and the ways that we're using these mobile phones are to send each other messages. So we are globally more likely to send a message to each other than we are to pick up the phone and have a voice conversation. So we're using our media to wait. We send messages and we wait for a response. And in each culture throughout history, this has been the case. We're sending messages and we're waiting for responses. We do it now with text, we do it with our emails, and cultures throughout history have sent messages and waited for responses, from messengers running on horseback between locations, letters sealed and stamped, telegrams transmitted across oceans, and news updates printed in the morning edition. But we don't just wait for a message. Waiting is actually a fundamental component of the message itself. We're constantly interpreting the wait time. We're interpreting the time lag. And as we wait, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling hopeful, fearful, we feel longing, we even get bored. Waiting becomes a part of the message itself. In 1847, there was a soldier named Edwin Biles, and I came across his letter in a cardboard box in an archive in Southern California at the Center for American War Letters. And Biles was a soldier in the Mexican-American War. He had been deployed for 3 months. He wrote a ton of letters back home to his family in Philadelphia and heard nothing for 3 months. And then all of a sudden, just after the 4th of July, he gets a letter from his father. And he is just absolutely relieved because the date mark on it is 3 months prior to that moment. And so he writes back his father and he says, you can see from these postmarks that letters are taken on average about 3 months to get across 2 countries and across muddy roads. And he said to his father, "I had been expecting to hear from you for some time, and I could not imagine why I did not receive your letter. I am very glad indeed to hear that I am not forgotten." So for him, that wait time, he thought, out of sight, out of mind, my family's forgotten about me. 20 years later, the American Civil War was going on, and a girlfriend was writing to her boyfriend who was in the Confederate Army, and she wrote to him and just stopped hearing from him. She didn't get a letter back from him, so she's writing letter after letter to him saying, "Why have you been so remiss in writing me? Have I offended you in any way? I beg you, implore you, beseech you, entreat you to tell me why you have not written and why you have obliterated me from your memory." He was actually captured by the Union soldiers, so he was a POW, totally unable to write to her, and she was just waiting. And she took this waiting extremely personally, letter after letter. She's just railing on the guy, why have you forgotten me? And as soon as he's released, they got married. So in our own moment, we see lots of similarities with how we interpret text messages. So I've been doing, along with our graduate assistant in DCC, Joseph Meyer, we've been doing a nationwide study of how college students interpret time lag in their text messages. So we've surveyed over 200 students at about 20 universities across the nation. And people take it very personally when you don't respond. Rejection is the thing that's felt over and over again by these students. So when they don't get a response, they say, I feel rejected. That was my interpretation. I'm pretty much always concerned about not receiving a response from this particular person. And by not receiving a response, how do you interpret it? That I am extremely unimportant to this person, that they have a million things that they'd rather do than talk to mediocre me. My interpretation of not receiving a response was that they didn't care to answer, and I know they saw my message. So this is a recurring thing too. Unlike Biles and unlike this girlfriend of a Confederate soldier, we know that our messages are being delivered. Either you have a timestamp, you have a read receipt on iMessage, or 24 hours have gone by and you know that person has their phone on them and they've seen your message and they've chosen not to respond. And we take it extremely personally. Another interview that we did, they said to us, my interpretation of not receiving a response was sad, hurt almost. It stung a little because you send that message with hope that a reply will be coming in minutes, if not a few hours, when they aren't busy, and you don't get one at all. Especially with me living far away from my friends and family, I take it a little too personal if I send someone an emotional message and I don't get a reply like I was wishing. I follow up with my concern by checking in on them in a few days later or sooner to make sure they are okay. Nothing is going on with them that caused a no response. But I get it. Sometimes you were busy and accidentally opened it and mean to respond, but tasks take you away. So we saw this over and over again with the students that we studied, that time lag means something. How quickly you respond means something. We give it, we interpret it. We tie it into the messages and how we understand them. So I'm working on a book right now called Waiting for Word, which looks at the history of waiting and how waiting has become an important part of our culture. So I'm looking at it all the way back to Aboriginal message sticks, which are these batons that Aboriginal tribes in Australia would carve pictographs on to remind them of the message, and they would take these across to another tribe, and when they arrived, they would send their messages. This is the first mobile medium that humans have ever used. That's the first messages we've ever sent tens of thousands of years ago. I look at pneumatic tubes in New York City, which would send mail around the city, and in Philadelphia up to 6 times a day. You could get a message within an hour, and the idea of instantaneous culture, of being able to just send messages back and forth, was a real core part of what this moment meant for them. And inscribed in that, still within instantaneous culture, is how waiting and time lag become important. I'm also looking at New Horizons spacecraft, which did its recent flyby of Pluto. 16 months to gather all that data. We're waiting. Waiting is an essential part of human knowledge. The things that we know, we wait for. We have to study them. Everything we know about the universe, about our planet, involves some form of waiting for word. Right now, we're still waiting for the rest of the messages to come down from New Horizons' flyby of Pluto, and we will continue to learn. And this is how we learn. This is how we know about the world. Waiting is a core part of that. So I'm hoping, ultimately, that this work will shed new light on the relationship between waiting, technology, human intimacy, and everything that we know. That our wait times, as they've shifted across history, have fundamentally changed what we know about the universe and ultimately what we know about each other and how we imagine human intimacy.